The imperial nursery of Dracorath had seen 17 caretakers in as many months. Each one, carefully selected from the most prestigious species across the Galactic Coalition, had failed spectacularly. The problem wasn't their credentials or their experience. It was the Emperor's twin hatchlings themselves. Nurse Alina Rowe stepped through the crystalline archway, her worn medical bag slung over one shoulder. She was the 18th candidate and by far the least impressive on paper. No telepathic abilities, no scales or natural armor, no advanced sensory organs, just a human from Earth's outer colonies, with 20 years of pediatric nursing and a reputation for handling difficult cases. The Imperial Chamberlain, a towering Velkari with 4 arms and bioluminescent patterns across his chitinous face, looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. You understand the situation, yes? The hatchlings are spirited. Through the reinforced observation window, Alina could see the source of the problem. 2 dragon hatchlings, each the size of a large dog, were engaged in what could only be described as systematic destruction. One breathed jets of superheated plasma at the fireproof walls, while the other used its nascent telekinetic abilities to hurl expensive equipment across the room. Their scales shimmered between crimson and gold, marking them as direct offspring of Emperor Catharian himself. Spirited, Alina repeated, watching as a hapless servo drone was melted into slag. That's one word for it. The Emperor is concerned, the Chamberlain continued. These are his first offspring in 3 centuries. Their mother, the Empress, perished during the birthing. His Majesty has been distraught, unable to bond with them properly. They refuse all food, destroy everything, and have injured 6 trained caregivers severely enough to require regeneration tanks. Alina nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the hatchlings. She noticed something the Chamberlain hadn't mentioned: the way they moved in perfect synchronization, how their destruction followed a pattern, how they would pause every few minutes and look toward the empty doorway with what could only be described as desperate hope. They're not acting out, she said quietly. They're grieving. The Chamberlain's bioluminescence flickered in confusion. Grieving? They're barely 3 months old. Dragon hatchlings don't develop emotional cognition until— With respect, Alina interrupted. I don't care what the textbooks say. Those babies lost their mother, and their father's too wrapped up in his own grief to be there for them. They're scared, angry, and testing boundaries because no one's setting any. She turned to face the Chamberlain fully. I'll take the job, but I do it my way. No observers, no interference, and you tell His Majesty that if he wants his children to thrive, he needs to show up. The Chamberlain's 4 arms crossed simultaneously. You presume much, human. The Emperor does not take orders from— The Emperor, a voice like rolling thunder interrupted, is standing right here. Both turned. Emperor Catharian filled the corridor, his massive draconic form somehow compressed into a vaguely humanoid shape that still radiated ancient power. His scales were the color of dying stars, and his eyes held the weight of centuries. He looked exhausted. You speak boldly for someone so small, he said. But there was no anger in his voice, only curiosity. Alina met his gaze without flinching. Your Majesty, I've worked in pediatric units across 12 systems. I've seen every species, every family configuration, every tragedy. And I can tell you this, those hatchlings don't need another stranger with credentials. They need their father. Something flickered in the Emperor's ancient eyes. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. I have tried, he said softly. They do not respond to my presence. They seem to hate me. They don't hate you, Alina said. They're testing you. Children, any children, need to know they're safe, that someone will stay no matter how badly they behave. You keep leaving when they act out, which confirms their worst fear, that everyone abandons them eventually. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Then to the Chamberlain's visible shock, he nodded. What would you have me do, Nurse Rowe? Come with me, she said simply. They entered the nursery together, the tiny human and the ancient dragon Emperor. The hatchlings immediately launched into their destructive routine, but Alina walked calmly to the center of the room and sat down cross-legged on the scorched floor. What are you doing? Catharian rumbled, sitting with them. Your Majesty, please join me. Awkwardly, impossibly, the Emperor folded his massive form down beside her. The hatchlings paused in their rampage. Confused by this new development, Alina opened her medical bag and pulled out something that made the Chamberlain gasp from the observation window. A human children's book, printed on actual paper, with colorful illustrations. This is what human parents do when children are upset, she explained, opening to the first page. We read to them. It doesn't matter if they understand every word. It's about the rhythm, the attention, the consistency. She began to read, her voice steady and warm. It was a story about a brave little creature who went on an adventure and always found their way home. The hatchlings crept closer, curiosity overriding their rage. Emperor Catharian watched in wonder as his children, who had terrorized trained professionals, sat quietly to listen to a human woman read from a paper book. They're listening, he whispered. Of course they are, Alina said. Now you try. Read the next page. The Emperor of Dracorath, ruler of 17 systems and commander of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, began to read a children's story to his babies. His voice, which had declared wars and negotiated treaties, softened to something gentle, something fatherly. When he finished the book, the smaller hatchling, the one who had been breathing fire, climbed into his lap. The larger one curled against Alina's side. They'll still test you, Alina warned quietly. This isn't a miracle cure. You'll need to be here every day, through the tantrums and the destruction. You'll need to be patient. Catharian carefully, reverently placed one massive claw on his child's back. Then I will be here. Every day. He looked at Alina with something approaching awe. How did you know this would work? Alina smiled, stroking the scales of the hatchling beside her. Because love isn't complicated, Your Majesty. It doesn't matter if you're human or dragon, if you breathe oxygen or plasma. Children need to know someone will stay. Someone will read them stories. Someone will sit with them in their pain. She looked at the Emperor directly. The brilliant thing wasn't what I did. It was convincing you to try. In the months that followed, the Imperial nursery stabilized. The hatchlings thrived under their father's daily attention, guided by a human nurse who understood that sometimes the most advanced solution was also the simplest. Show up, stay present, and love without conditions. And across the galaxy, other species began to take notice. Perhaps these humans, with their paper books and their stubborn insistence on emotional connection, knew something the rest of them had forgotten. Perhaps humanity's true strength had never been technology or warfare. Perhaps it had always been this, the brilliant, radical act of caring.